have you ever found yourself thinking, why there's so many people that prejudge others based on the color of their skin? And why there's so many people that still hold to racist views today? Well, if you thought that, join us for this conversation as we unpack some of the experiences of racism today, and also we look at, well, who really kicked this thing off? Where does racism actually begin? Let's have a look. Let's go. Let's find the root.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Let's Find the Root. You're here with Jordan Jones and
Caleb Jones.
we're here for another episode. We're going to recap from last week's episode, and of course, we're going to go into this week's episode, which we're so excited to share with you. So, guys, remember, stay tuned. Let's get into it. Caleb, let's go.
Let's go. So last week we discussed how race is a social construct. But just because it's a social construct doesn't mean that it's not real and felt by people today. And so we discussed how the impacts of race are felt and how they impress themselves upon us in modern society. And so in this, we discussed how that forms our opinions of people and how it really affects how we see the world. But we asked the question, with the unconscious biases and the negativity that surrounded race, in the same way that it's being socially constructed, can we deconstruct it, and are we willing to? Is it something that we are willing to just get rid of? But that's a question for you, and I absolutely loved the comment section of the last episode. I had a wonderful conversation. So I love when you guys interact. We had a lovely conversation with you in the comment section. So keep coming with that. And this episode, we really want to look at, okay, well, just because race has been formulated, where did those unconscious biases actually come from? Because you can, when the person who we referenced last week, Blumenbach, actually made it, he didn't actually come with the actual the biases that we now identify race with today. So we really want to look at where that came from. But first of all, George, what are the biases that we see that come with race today? What are the things that the stereotypes, negative or positive, that we see today with race?
Yeah, so even that question itself, I think, is interesting because depending upon your experience, you have different types of biases that you've been affected by. But for me personally, um, I believe that this is a personal question really for how I've been affected by unconscious bias. Me being a black man, especially in the workplace, that before you're even interviewed or before you get to a certain stage, that sometimes you get they get a perception of who you are. So what we find is that for me, just talk from my experience, I found that in the workplace that you generally find that they believe that black men are quite lazy or laid back or don't get as stressed, and use that as a way to say that we're not hard workers. I found that for myself. Sometimes we find it when we walk into certain situations or certain places or rooms or spaces that this color of our skin can have people can view us in a certain way. So unconscious bias is something where you walk into a place or into a room, onto a set of people, and they already, before you've opened your mouth, have a preconceived thought about you that you cannot, that affects you without you knowing it almost, which I would say is a unconscious bias in that. So I've experienced that. I'm sure others from different races, if you want to say that, or ethnicities even, have also experienced that from their own experience. So I think it's something, even Caleb, I'm sure you can share some experiences where you've walked into certain spaces or certain areas where you've been affected by unconscious bias. So yeah, that's how I would
Yeah.
answer that. Definitely is today, and it tends to be mainly in schools. Sometimes you see it in schools, see it in universities. You see, I think you see it all across society, and that's down to, if I was to say, a source would be from the experiences of the past that have transitioned now into the future, and people's mindsets being formulated before they're able to make a decision about you by getting to know
Yeah,
you.
I think
That's what I would say.
like you're saying, there's things. The thing which you basically said about lazy, um, about laid back, not a hard worker. I've kind of seen. So with me coming from like just in general, I've not necessarily been except for in church. I've not necessarily been surrounded by other black people. So I've seen basically the stereotypes of, you know, you're either expected when you step, especially in secondary school, straight away they expect you to be, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
the best athlete out of everyone. That's just something that people expect. They expect you to be, you know, rough or rugged and
Hmm. Hmm.
aggressive, stuff like that. That's something that's being put my way. And then, but also I could say for like, say, other races like that, there's certain biases for them. So I had a lot of Asian friends. So immediately it's like their assumption is that, you know, they're a bit you've got that assumption of them being academically impressive, but kind of lacking in, I don't know, academically impressive, but there's certain kind of stereotypes of like when you've got a darker skin tone, it's perceived as dirty or something like that, things like that, and you see those
Hmm.
types of just like biases and jokes being thrown about just in general. There's a kind of look down on you as if you're
Hmm.
not of the same status, or you're slightly poorer or something like that. That those are the types of stereotypes that come. But yeah, those are the types of things that I got to see. I also got to see in university a kind of change as well, because even between, um, I find it interesting because, as I said, race is a Western concept. So race is a concept that perpetuated from, you know, Western philosophy, Western ideology. So it's different when you see a black person that hasn't grown up in the West. So like when you've seen someone that's actually from like African, born in an African country like Nigeria, Ghana, one of those places, and they come to university or just anywhere in Africa, the actual um, behavior is very different. And so
Hmm.
even between that, like I feel like those stereotypes in university amongst black people didn't really carry the same weight, because I saw, and this is something that I'd, you know, put to people when I saw the difference between Afro Caribbean and African, like African descent. So basically, those two ethnicities, the Afro Caribbean, African, you actually see a completely different like behavior. You see less Afro Caribbeans, and the interesting thing is like because of the factor of them, the Afro Caribbeans which I met there were actually born in England, and the mentality is actually quite different. So the way in which you view yourself takes on more of a race ideology of what we're saying. You know, you're only good for sports. You're only good for
Hmm.
you're not academically there. You're a hard man or something like that, and you have to be like you have to be running streets, running ends and stuff like that. That's the ideology that comes with like black. But when you saw like when I met people that were just born in Africa, they were high performing. Like they had the mentality that I am, like an elite mentality. That's something that I saw, like a genuine elite mentality. They didn't see themselves like, oh, they didn't associate themselves with that idea of like, okay, I have to be running ends, I have to be this. Their idea was like, I'm a high performer. I'm going to be successful in my degree. And you see like the best performing, um like some of the best highest performers that we see across the world are, especially in universities and things like that, are like Africans. And that's what's interesting. So if we're looking at that, why do you feel that? I basically explained why I felt that was. But have you noticed that, Jordan? Have you noticed like a difference in mentality even amongst um, black people, depending on their
Yeah, black
ethnicity?
people. Yeah. 100%. From my experience, and even recently meeting a young man from Nigeria, and now kind of being more accustomed to speaking with people that are African in their descent, meaning that they've were born in Africa and have now come to the UK. Their experience to our experience is completely different. The way that their minds are set up, the way that we see ourselves, are completely set up because we've come from a background of in its especially Afro-Caribbean people that have now moved to the UK. We our parents or our grandparents before them were not educated. They were not educated. They came to through the Windrush movement. They came to settle in England to help build up England after I believe it was the Second World War, if I'm saying that right. And they were not educated. They just came here just to make a living. But the Africans that were born in Africa, they were wealthy. They had good education. Their parents were educated people. So the experience in that is completely different, and the mindset is different. They do not see themselves as we're now kind of coming up or building ourselves up, so we can now sit on a level footing with, another ethnicity. They understood who they are, and they have that mentality. For us, we've had to now develop that and grow into that. So I
I think
100%
even there, like,
go on, bro.
because I've been back to Jamaica, with my
Mm,
granddad,
mm,
with our granddad, and literally seeing where, like, our family's from, like a farming, like, in the
yeah.
country area, but then like some of the family has moved on and moved away from like the family home that
Mm, mm,
grandparents grew up in, and seeing that, like,
yeah.
I realized, okay, yeah, we're not. They weren't educated. They weren't from that, but the
Yeah.
mentality was different. So like seeing some of the ones that are still in Jamaica, and like now seeing them, the schools which they go to in like Kingston and stuff like that, and seeing how
Right.
educated they are and how well spoken they are, and how I was just like, okay, this is the. I feel like it's the mentality of how they view themselves, because even I feel like education, I remember dad saying when he went to Jamaica, and how the education was just so much better than when he was in England
Yeah.
and
Of
things
course.
like that.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that this kind of transition of being, say, like being in a majority Afro-Caribbean, or even being a
Hmm, hmm,
majority in
hmm,
a nation,
hmm.
sets you in a more elite mentality, I believe. And I
Yes.
feel
Yes.
like the when once you transition from, like, say, when people started to move from, like, say, Jamaica, even though they came from the descendants of slaves, because they had because the structure of the society was set up that they were in the majority, they allowed themselves to kind of be built up. But when they moved to somewhere like America, when they moved to um,
Yeah.
the UK, the mentality
Okay. Yeah.
switches, because now you go there, and the first thing that
Mm.
happened, especially when you hear about the Windrush stories, is that,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. That's right.
well, you know,
But firstly, they before they even got here, they were sold a dream. I think that's the first thing you got in mind. They came to England with a dream to help build up, to start their careers, start their new lives, and they were met with hostility. So I think even getting here, Caleb, that dream, they didn't come here, leaving their home thinking that they wouldn't still have the same kind of level footing as they did in Jamaica. But I think that's a big thing
but I
as
feel
well.
like it's different, because, like I said, when I was speaking about the ones, so like our grandparents that are coming from,
Hmm,
farming areas, and those that move to like the towns. So the towns are different
hmm.
to the farming areas. So, like, trust me, that is one of the biggest juxtapositions I've seen. Like, I mean, traveling out, like, you get like seeing, Kingston, then you go to
Yeah, yeah,
out in the country, as you call it. You know
right.
what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
it's
yeah.
I mean, it's just different. Yeah. So I mean,
Well, I haven't experienced it yet. We need to go.
yeah, genuinely, it's grounding, extremely grounding.
Wow.
But
Okay.
the reason why, like, people like our grandparents moved, I can only speak for like the ones that are coming from like the country and stuff like that,
Mm, mm,
is because they knew they had better opportunities elsewhere. So like one
yeah.
thing that our great grandparents, they didn't just come to the UK first. I remember like they traveled to like quite a few different countries working and things like that,
Yeah.
and then they went to the UK, brought over our granddad, stuff like that. And that's
Yeah.
like
So,
because they were seeking a better opportunity. And I heard someone speak about this. Like, I can't remember what the interview was, but I saw it on Instagram, and they're speaking about the identity of within certain colonies. So like in Jamaica, they would have seen themselves as as British citizens because they were
yeah.
part
Yeah.
of the Commonwealth. And then when they
Wow.
came there, to see the way that the people there actually thought of them was probably like a shell shock. But those ones that came, they came to make a better life for themselves. Not to say that they were better off in Jamaica, but
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
socially probably they wouldn't. Socially
Hmm.
for sure they wouldn't have had the same like um it wouldn't have been as thick the racial tension. But um it they weren't actually like they were like our family anyway, farming and stuff like that, and moving to
Yeah.
UK
Yeah.
would have been able to build in a different way, and that's how you see us today, to be honest. And in a way,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
as tough as, and it's as like they went through some hell just to get us to where we are. They went through some serious
Listen.
hell, and that's
Definitely.
why
Definitely. Definitely. Hard
but yeah,
hours.
that's the kind of. But when they came
Mm.
here, those kind of biases, those types of vendettas against them. I'm thinking, where are those things built up? Because as we said,
Oof,
they're
yeah.
not necessarily like we were saying about it's a Western thing. So Africans didn't necessarily have Africans coming to the UK, like now going to university, don't necessarily see, like rightly so, don't see themselves as less than, because they're not formulated with the
Yeah. Of course.
ideology of race. And even like
Hmm.
I was saying, some of the like the Jamaicans, some of our family members, Jamaicans that are there going well educated, well off, they ain't seeing themselves as less than. But
Of
the
course not. Yeah.
mentality
Yeah.
comes when you move from and you're drenched with the Western culture. Once
Yeah.
that starts to get into you, that's when it's like, okay, the ideology of race starts to seep into how you view yourself and starts to make you belittle yourself. So I think let's
But
now.
even that, before you even get onto that, you, how would you leaving a your home country where you have a certain philosophies and ideals in your mind already, and then now moving to the Western society, how could their minds be so shifted? What would shift their minds? You know what I mean? What is the thing that you think would shift their
I
minds?
think I don't think it's necessarily that their mind shifted. It's just the fact of it's the system or the mentality feeds itself into you. So like if you're surrounded by something, there's this process called diffusion. Yeah.
Hmm.
So in and this happens like within cells. So what happens is something moves from a high concentration to a low concentration through like a
Hmm.
permeable membrane. It's something that happens in biology. Um, but what happens is once you're somewhere, so basically you have a high concentration of something. After a while, it starts to move into the lower concentration, and then it starts to balance itself out. So what I would say is these, well educated, these you have the mentality from home that you're good, you're able, you're capable, but you come into a society where they continuously tell you, everybody's telling you, you're less than because you're black, you're this because you're black, you're that because you're black. You've got,
Hmm. Hmm.
because the bigger concentration is the people outside telling you you're less than, you can't do it, you're not going to be able to make it. After a while, it doesn't matter how strong
Yeah.
you've been taught it, after a while it starts to seep into your brain. And so you have to have a really strong mental fortitude to basically say, I'm not going to let that in. And no matter
Yeah. Of
how
course.
tough everything outside is telling me, no matter how many different voices, you have to have a strength of saying, I'm not going to let that in. But what's happened is, over time, people have been weighed down. You know what I mean? And that's why I find you hear this being said. Yeah, I mean, like I've African friends, they will tell you there's a difference between someone who's born in Africa and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and came over, and someone
Mm,
who's born in England but is from African parents. Because the point
mm,
is,
mm,
the society has taken its toll on you. It's started to feed into you, and that's why I think it's
mm.
important now to understand. Okay, cool. We've seen the effects. We've discussed um, the personal uh,
Yeah.
effects,
Outlook.
outlook, and
Effects.
effects,
Yeah.
and different things. But now let's kind of look why that happens. So why is this kind of entrenched into how people see people in the West, and how that Western ideology is kind of just
Mm.
perpetuated itself outwardly? Okay, so this is where we get into, and we're not gonna go too hard on this, because if you do want us to,
No.
we'll put our sources in and stuff like that, and we'll send that to you. But we're just gonna give it a little bit of an overview. So
Yeah.
I think let's go into Immanuel Kant. So Immanuel Kant is one of the foremost thinkers, one of the biggest contributors to Western ideology and philosophy, especially in politics and especially in international policy. So this person is like an extremely popular forward thinker in the age of enlightenment in the 1800s. Okay, he's big.
Yeah.
He's big. And what's crazy is this person, Immanuel Kant, is actually the person who perpetuated the idea of race, in the concept of dividing and speaking about races in different, with different
Yeah.
connotations and um, different. He put certain characteristics on different races. So I'm just gonna read. I'm
Yes,
gonna
he
read
did.
out one of his. I'm telling you, this guy. Just listen, listen.
Listen,
This
guys. Listen.
person
You need to know
is
about
one
this
of the
guy.
foremost thinkers that underlies Western ideology.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what underlies how people viewed politics, how
Mm,
people viewed
mm.
international policy. Understand that. Understand that. This is what he said. This is what he said. Yeah, this is what he said. The white race possesses all incentives and talents in itself. He thinks white people are superior. The
Mm-hmm.
race of Negroes can be educated, but only as slaves. The indigenous Americans cannot be educated. They care about nothing and are lazy. Okay, okay. Let's just stop right there. This guy, this man is one of the underlying pinning men behind our ideologies
Yes.
of philosophy, morality, politics, international
Yes.
policy. Yeah.
Aesthetics as well, which is talking about the way we see things, the images that we see. So there's so much. Guys. I mean, we could write an article on this brother right here. A article.
Because
But I
it's
think,
just
Caleb,
like,
keep going,
the
man. Keep
reason
going.
why I
Keep
want
going.
to
Keep going.
really want to say this is because when you look at that, okay, he says Negroes can be educated but only as slaves. What does that tell you? He thinks that we're only good to be educated to a certain level. What did we say are
That's right.
certain perceptions that we see today? Black people are only good for,
That's right.
sports,
Certain
certain
jobs,
jobs,
certain roles,
certain roles. They
sports.
can't
Yeah.
fit it.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes
Mhm.
from? This guy.
As a source.
And what
Yeah.
is worse, he said, Native American, indigenous Americans cannot be educated. They care about nothing and are lazy. What did I say? He was one of the four thinkers in politics and in philosophy, and in international politics. As we said before, the idea, the slave trade did not take up speed in the way that it was going to until the 1800s. Why? It needed a premise to do so. Here comes Immanuel Kant. Native Americans, not good for anything. They're lazy. Why do you think they've been driven to the point of extinction? Because someone had to come up with a way of basically saying they're not good enough, they're not talented enough, they're not capable of anything. This is what he said about them: indigenous Americans cannot be educated. They are not about, they care about nothing and are lazy. Where do these ideas come from? Where do these,
Hmm.
like we
Hmm.
said, where do these these unconscious biases come from? If
Vices
this is
come from.
someone
Yeah.
who has been the underlying forethinker for a lot of our understanding of morality, philosophy, politics in Western
And
and ethics
ethics.
in
Yeah,
Western philosophy.
yeah,
What? How can you do better? If this is the person that created the ideology of race, how can you do better? It
that's right.
just
That's right.
gets
You can't do
worse.
better.
Honestly, it gets worse. Let me just read just another one of his quotes. Okay, let me just read that, and then we'll talk about his classifications for
Jeez,
race,
yeah.
and I'll let Jordan get into it. But it honestly it burns me. I'm not gonna lie to you. It burns me. So he
Burns.
goes, the Negroes of Africa have by nature no feeling that rises above the trifling. Like this,
Boy.
this is a person. This is the person, yeah, who underlies, which a lot of people even today base their morality off his concepts,
Yeah, yeah.
and this is what he thought. Okay, Mister. So So he says he challenges anyone to cite a single example in which a Negro has shown talents and asserts that among the hundreds of thousands of blacks who are transported elsewhere from their countries, although many of them have been set free, still not a single one was ever found who presented anything great in art or science or any other praiseworthy quality, even though among the whites some continually rise aloft from the lowest rabble and through superior gifts earn respect in the world. He's saying black people aren't good for art, black people black people aren't good for science, black people ain't good for or sorry, Negroes of Africa. Yeah,
Negro
that's a
shit.
better way to put it because he classifies them
Negro
into
shit.
this category of black. Okay, this he's the one that develops this ideology and this mentality about them. So he says, and so the fundamental difference between these two races of man, it appears to be as great in regard to mental capacities as in color. So he basically said that the differences between white and black people are as great in color as they are in mental capacity. What were we
Wow.
saying about our experiences?
That's right. That's right.
Where
That's
do you
right.
think that comes from? It's someone had to think of this. As we said, we explained it's a social construct.
Yeah, that's
We
right. Yeah.
explained it's
Social
not
construct.
based on any actual genetics.
No, it's no genetics.
But
That's
who's the
right.
person that socially engineered it? The person that socially engineered morality, philosophy, politics for a lot of people that a lot of people follow even today.
Hmm.
That
Yeah, that's right.
underpins a
Yeah.
lot of Western culture. So again, I put this question to you: if the origin, if the concept, if the ideology is surrounded, entrenched, but like deep dive, baptized, baptized in
Dunked
dunked,
him immersed.
immersed in disrespect,
Bet.
in
Yeah. Yeah.
derogatory terms, in division, in
Yeah. Yeah.
just general disdain for anything that isn't white. How can you? How can we fix this? How can we change it? Or shall we just get rid of it? I think this is something that it's
Mm.
a continual question, but it's a question. It's not basically you have to accept our answer. We're just basically putting forward the facts of where this came from, who did this thing, where this came from. But yeah, man,
Yeah. So listen, guys. Whew.
I just
If you listen, I'm just. What can I say? What can I say? There's so much about this man, Immanuel Kant, that we want to really break down. And we're not going to, there's so much. I mean, when we found this out, if we found this out during the Black Lives Matter movement, and it made us really search. God led us to this because that whole movement, the killing of George Floyd, really spurred us on to have a look at what is race, and to think now you've gone through the first episode, the second episode, and now you found the root and the source of who brought these philosophies. How are you feeling? Drop that in the comments, guys.
yeah, just tell us how you're
Drop that
feeling.
in the comments.
Tell
Tell us
tell
how
it
you
how
feel,
tell us how
because
it makes you feel.
yeah, man. Because for us, it's more about now we understand the root. Now it's about the healing process.
Thank you, Root family, for joining us in this conversation. We're so happy to be able to discuss with you, and we really look forward to hearing back from you. I know myself and Jordan were really passionate about this conversation as we really understood where some of these philosophies came from and how it stems from Immanuel Kant and his writings. And so next week we're going to continue to look into that and have a look at the categories that he classified races into and the characteristics he attributed to them, which really underpins a lot of the racism we actually see today. So get at us in the comment section, like, share, subscribe, share it with someone that you feel would be impacted by this message and has been impacted by racism. Share it with people that are intellectuals and studying racism and see their thoughts on the topic. But we'd love to interact with you in the comments section. Shout out to Uncle Sean for last week, Sean Campbell, who was in the comments and had a great discussion about race. Keep on doing that, guys. Keep on joining us, Root family, and we'll see you next week.